Can you be with this part of you that you're ashamed of, or this part of you that you're afraid is going to cost you something, or this part of you that you think is going to look stupid, or this part of you that thinks it's going to keep you from fulfilling your potential? Can you just risk being with it for a moment? Can you look it in the face? In Western culture, this is very counterintuitive. We're taught if you recognize a problem, you need to go fix that problem.
Hi, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Sarah Yudkin, and I'm a relationship anxiety coach who's here to help you learn about all things love, relationships, and how to navigate anxiety in your relationships. If relationships are really meaningful to you and you've gotten any value from my videos so far, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to my channel and become a member of the You Love and You Learn community. This goes a long way to supporting me in this channel and makes sure that you don't miss any new videos coming out. And if you enjoy this video, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a like and a comment so I know what's resonating. Thank you for watching, and let's get into it. Welcome back, everybody. I'm excited to bring you this conversation with Mollie Birney, who is a clinical life coach who was previously in her past life a therapist. And we talk about the transition from being a therapist to being a coach and that identity shift that she went through. But she tends to work with high achieving professionals and overthinkers who want behavioral change and freedom from the noise in their heads, which I know a lot of you listening can relate to. So, really excited to have had this conversation with Mollie. What we talked about was the process of changing identity and how it's not an easy process, but that we can take small and bite sized steps to shift our identities. For example, let's say we've always identified as being a very anxious person, but we realize that if we always identify as being anxious, then we tend to act more anxiously. So that would be an example of an identity that we may want to potentially shift if it feels helpful for us. So I'm excited for this episode. I get a little vulnerable in this episode about an upcoming identity shift I am thinking about making. And so very excited to bring you this conversation. Let's get into it. Hey, Mollie. So happy to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Yes, I am too. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more. I know that you used to be a therapist and now you identify more as a coach. So I'm curious if you can share a little bit more about your journey because I'm fascinated by that decision to shift. And I know for those who maybe haven't come across your world, it will be helpful context for this conversation.
Hell yes, it's a topic I feel really passionate about. For me, the reason for the pivot, it's funny, I don't often hear people say I identify as a coach or identify as a therapist, but it absolutely is an identity. For me, the shift was about wanting a pace and an approach to mental health conversation that felt a little bit more authentic and a little bit more disruptive. I started to notice that I had a number of clients who completely understood why they were the way they are. They could write a dissertation on their childhood. They know why they do what they do, but they kept asking in session, how do I do it differently? And I had suggestions, but kept biting my tongue because they weren't clinically appropriate. And eventually my coach said to me, are you done pretending to be a therapist? Are you ready to have the conversation you've been wanting to have all along? And he's been my coach for 20 years. And so I apprenticed under him and finally said, yes, I will surrender licensure. And here we go. And it was a kind of a terrifying pivot. I was scared to lose my credibility. I'd worked hard, obviously, to get a master's in clinical psych and training, et cetera. And then to go off in this unlicensed, uncredentialed direction felt like a bit of a cowboy move. And so it was scary, but it was totally right for me.
I love that. Yeah. And I use the word identity intentionally because it's something I want to talk more about today. And I know that it's something you've been thinking a lot about, I'm sure, in your own personal experiences, but you now have an offering coming up to help people understand and explore identity. So before we get into that conversation, can you just define what identity means to you when you say that word? What are you
Sure.
intending behind it?
Well, the word identity in the context of the freedom work, which is that's the curriculum that I work with, and identity is a way we have to be seen or can't be seen by others. So they're the qualities or characteristics which we want to promote and market about ourselves, and then those that we want to withhold and airbrush and make sure nobody sees. So it's all about the marketing system, what we're allowed to be recognized for and which characteristics we don't want to be seen as. So you want to be seen as attractive, you don't want to be seen as irrelevant, you want to be seen as smart, you don't want to be seen as stupid, you want to be seen as loyal, you don't want to be seen as disloyal. But the reality is in any identity, any quality about ourselves that we're trying to promote, we are also a hostage to that identity. So if you need to be seen as loyal, for example, you don't have the freedom to walk away from a partnership when it's time, or if you're being taken advantage of, because you have to promote that loyalty. So
Yeah.
that identity conversation to me is about what do we actually have the freedom to do and be, and where are we limiting ourselves significantly?
Yeah. And just for even my understanding, when you say freedom work, is that a specific type of coaching that you do, or is it like helping your clients find more freedom in their life? Or what do you mean when you say that?
Sure. That's the curriculum that I had learned from my mentor, Brett Costin, and I've been putting it out in the world a little bit differently. He just spoke about it. It's sort of in the way that mystics will talk about feeling the blind man feeling the elephant and going, well, I guess this is this component. When I built out the Freedom course book, this was the result of the conversation that I'd been around for 20 years. And so
Okay.
here I'm disseminating all of the components, and identity is a component of the freedom work. But yeah, it's about being able to live with more liberation, more oxygen, more permission, so that, for example, you can risk the possibility of being disloyal where appropriate without it meaning you are disloyal. Or that as a coach, even though I'm giving up licensure, yeah, it may not mean I don't have a credential, but does that mean I don't have credibility?
Mhm.
The fear in moving into coaching is that I would lose credibility, but I had to risk that in order to actually have freedom. So that's the
Yeah.
construct.
That makes sense. And in addition to things that we want to be seen as or not seen as, do we also tend to identify with certain labels we put on ourselves, like therapist or coach or parent or daughter, fiance, wife? Do we tend to associate certain qualities with the labels we place on ourselves, or how do you see that tying in?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is where it gets tricky, is that any way we need to be seen, it really does pigeonhole us, that we want to allow for some evolution in this. That,
Mm.
for example, I needed to be seen as a student for a long time and as a good student. But pivoting into the role of, oh, wow, now I'm a teacher, and now I have the freedom to say, no, actually, that's not accurate. Let me tell you how I see this, rather than being deferential and asking more questions. That's more heroic for me to risk being in an authority position rather than I'm much more comfortable as a student. I'm much more comfortable in the freedom to not know and be figuring it out rather than there's some authority that's supposed to know. Or if you're a mother for a particular phase of life, we have to allow that to evolve a little bit, that once your child leaves the house, there will be suffering if one is still trying to identify exclusively as a mother. So, yeah, we want to
Mm.
let the question is, what's the relationship to the identity? Do you have it or does it have you?
Yeah, that reminds me of a post you shared recently where you said, if you want to change something about yourself, first you have to be in relationship with it. So, is that what you mean when you say being in relationship with your identity? Is it about learning more about how it either has us or we have it? What does that process look like to being more in
Yeah.
relationship with our identity?
Yeah, to understand it and lean into it. So, for example, if I look at the part of myself when I pivoted from therapist into coaching that was terrified of looking stupid, was terrified of being seen as not credible or irresponsible in some way, that rather than that my survival system is going, let me figure out how to look competent so I never have to look stupid. But in freedom, there's the freedom to be competent where appropriate and also be silly and irreverent and even stupid where appropriate. So if I'm looking at being in relationship with that fear of being seen as stupid or fear of being seen as not competent, there's an element of the work of understanding why I am that way. Well, look, I came from a family of academics. It's understandable why I would have this fear of looking stupid. But understanding where it came from isn't enough. As I said, this is a big reason of pivoting from the work. The question is, well, what do I do with that? Can I notice when that fear of being seen as stupid is showing up in real time? Oh, I'm in this conversation with a podcaster and a colleague I admire, and I'm wanting to sound smart. Can I be aware of this in real time, right here, right now? So I don't have to just say a bunch of smart shit. Instead, I can just be authentic and fall on my sword and own, oh, yeah, I'm anxious. And of course, I'm trying to sound smart in this moment. Of course, there's the illusion that there's something to protect and something to promote. And can I just be enough in relationship with that fear in the moment that I don't have to have some bizarre behavior where I'm trying to use big words or trying to sound like a professional? Instead, I can simply acknowledge, yeah, that anxiety and fear is here. Of course. Of course, this desire to be seen as intelligent is present. Why wouldn't it be? Wouldn't it be strange if it wasn't after all these years? So, yeah, being in relationship, making room for it, and meeting it with compassion. Because so often we have any part of ourselves we want to change, we have judgment about. We often have contempt for it. There's the attempt to amputate it. Sorry, we don't get to transform or change any part of ourselves that we're trying to get rid of. Wait, so that's what I mean by being in relationship with it. Can we notice when it's in the room? Can I be curious about it? Can I make room for it rather than I got to get rid of this thing immediately?
Yeah, and I'm curious if you resonate with this. A lot of people unintentionally, and myself included, I've done this many times. You enter a coaching relationship or a therapy relationship, and you're like, this is going to be the thing that fixes me. And I call it the fix it
Yes.
mode, where it's okay, this thing is annoying, so I'm going to fix it. And or this pattern I keep falling into, I have to fix or get rid of it. And I feel like that self-compassion lens or being in relationship with your patterns is such a more helpful approach. But for the achiever or for someone who has always identified as being successful and I set goals and I reach them, it feels like you're almost being irresponsible if you're just being nicer or more curious about your patterns. It feels like,
Hmm.
oh, well, then I'm not living up to my potential if I keep this pattern here.
That's what I hear from clients a lot, that phrase of it's irresponsible to just embrace this part of myself. Because our fear is that if I embrace it, then it's going to own me, then it's going to run the show for me. And then, yeah, I'm going to melt into a puddle of mediocrity. I won't fulfill my potential. I won't achieve in the ways I'm supposed to. So it really is quite a counterintuitive ask. No, no, can you be with this part of you? Can you be with this part of you that you're ashamed of, or this part of you that you're afraid is going to cost you something, or this part of you that you think is going to look stupid, or this part of you that thinks it's going to keep you from fulfilling your potential? Can you just risk being with it for a moment? Can you look it in the face? In Western culture, this is very counterintuitive. We're taught if you recognize a problem, you need to go fix that problem. To your point, when we hire the person to fix us, all that does is affirm what a piece of shit you were before. So,
Hmm.
yes, there might be something helpful in that process, but the question is it actually solving the problem or is it validating the problem? And it's not uncommon, especially in mental health work, that, yeah, we're solving something, but we're also validating the problem at the same time. You're validating you're not enough, or you're validating you need whatever it is you've been paying for in order to keep being free. In the same way that a diet doesn't help heal your relationship with your body, it affirms that you can't trust your body and makes you more dependent on the diet in order to get the results you want. That's not freedom. That's
Hmm.
dependency on another diet rather than being able to trust your body. So freedom is a lot around the self-trust. Yes, use your resources, but we want to use those creatively, not in a way that affirms where you are.
Yeah, that's a really interesting piece. As you're talking, I'm thinking about the identity of being an achiever or the
Mhm.
identity of being successful. And then also maybe it's shadow part or the part that you want to try and shove down, which is a word such as laziness or resting and
Right.
relaxing. It feels like those two things are counterproductive in the mind if you're not willing to get curious about them. So
Mhm.
if you were working with a new client and they were coming to you and you could tell that they really identified with this successful, productive person, and you could tell they really wanted to fix parts of their laziness, or sometimes I'm just so tired and I can't do anything. What
Mm.
is it like when you're guiding someone to be in relationship with that lazy part or with
Yeah.
the part that's trying to achieve something?
Sure. Well, some of the questions that might come up there are, what are you telling yourself is true? When the laziness is present, what are you telling yourself that means about you? Because someone else out there is busy being lazy and doesn't have any noise about it. They don't have any commentary, they don't have any judgment, they just have permission to be lazy. And then they're going to go on with their workday after having been lazy for a bit. But usually, someone who's a high achiever, when the thought of laziness or the experience of laziness shows up, there is a judgment, there's a commentary, there's an interpretation. This is
Mhm.
dangerous. This is going to keep me from, this is a threat to who I am. I shouldn't be doing this. Now there's all this moral failure attached to the experience of laziness. When in reality, we're nuanced human beings. Yes, there's achievement, there's laziness, there's hunger, there's desire, there's boredom. This is a nuanced human process. We don't get to distill ourselves down to just the sexy pieces, just the achievement or just the self-promotion. We get to include the laziness too. So the first step there would be, what are you telling yourself is true? What's the commentary about that? And some questions like, is everyone not allowed to be lazy or just you? Are you the only one? Just to get to see that this is not actually in their value system.
Mm.
This is a judgment born of critical fear and shame, not critical thinking. Oftentimes for
Mhm.
overachievers, but when there's self-criticism present, they assume critical thinking is part of it. Just because there's self-abuse and self-criticism happening doesn't mean there's any critical thinking going on at all. So getting to see that that's an automatic thought, not one that is born of their creativity. It's not one that's born of their essence. It's a judgment. Now, we could also call that a trauma response if we were interested in where that came from. That's more of a therapeutic conversation. Well, how come you learned to think that way? Which is helpful. It can help us have compassion for, oh, right, when I'm lazy, here's the thought and here's my judgment about it. And we want to start noticing that in real time. That
Mm.
oftentimes we have so much judgment about the commentary that we can't build a relationship with it. This is why compassion is essential here. So I can be like, oh, there's the judgment. I understand why it's here. And then there's the work around, can I meet it exactly where it's at? Am I willing it to have it be here without it dictating what I can and can't do? So I don't have to get rid of it. I don't have to talk myself out of it. I don't have to convince myself that it isn't true. I don't even have to give myself permission to be lazy. I just have to notice that thought and meet it with a little bit of suspicion because most of the thoughts in our head come with so much authority and so much gravitas, and we listen like it's gospel. So this is really freedom from the noise in our head. That's where we're going with this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's so interesting when you do pause to just observe the thought versus the interpretation of the thought. And I read recently Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph
Mm-hmm.
Nguyen, and he made the difference of thoughts versus thinking. So the thought of I'm
Totally.
lazy could pop up, but then if you start thinking about the thought, oh gosh, I'm always lazy and I really need to get my shit together and hate that I'm doing, you
Right.
create this whole story on
There's a
top
whole
of
identity
the
there.
thought. Exactly. That
That's
popped up.
right. Yeah. So part of the work with that, when I say building a relationship with it, that's also about being able to notice it over time. So noticing, oh wow, my that laziness noise, the judgment about don't be lazy, came up at 9 o'clock and it came up at 10:30 and it came up at 11:45. And man, it didn't really matter what I was doing. I was never allowed to, really, I'm never allowed to be lazy, ever. There's never an appropriate moment for that. So getting to see some of the extremity and black and whiteness of those thoughts can help erode the credibility a little bit. And that's all
Mm.
we're looking to do is meet this thought with a little more curiosity rather than automatic credibility. That's how we build a relationship with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I imagine that most humans identify with multiple things just based on the way we're raised and the world we live in and growing up with parents or caretakers or teachers. Is it common that pretty much everyone has many things they identify with? Is there a world where we don't identify with things, or is that like a skill that would have to take practice? Is identity good or bad, or it just is?
Yeah, I don't know that it's good or bad. I think it's about being in the right relationship with it. So you
Okay.
have it rather
Yeah.
than it has you. So, for example, some of the feedback I got when I was training to be a therapist was like, look, you stop trying to be a smart therapist, Molly. You just need, do you want to be smart or do you want to be effective?
Mm.
And I was terrified because I thought being smart was being effective. There was the identity of needing to be seen as smart. And I had a client come in and she was a PhD. So already my survival system was like, better seem smart, Birney, better
Mm.
promote how intelligent you are. So she's a PhD and I'm in my imposter syndrome, essentially. What is she doing seeing me? I'm just a trainee. And she starts asking questions that fall into a category called reassurance seeking, right? And there I am being smart, smarty pants, answering her questions, providing her reassurance, and getting to feel intelligent and competent in the process. Like, oh, right, she's getting to see I'm smart. And it dawns on me, oh, this is that thing. This is me needing to be seen as smart, me needing to promote this identity that's robbing her of the experience she's actually here for. Because she doesn't
Mm.
need more answers to her questions. She doesn't need more reassurance. That just makes her dependent on me for the reassurance. What she actually needs is me to say, I don't know and risk looking stupid. Can we tolerate the not knowing together? That was her work. That's
Mhm.
the therapeutic intervention there. So, as soon as I need to be seen as smart, she doesn't get the healing she actually needs because suddenly my identity is more important than being of service. But in order to be of service, oh, cat just crawled in my lap. In order to be of service, I have to risk surrendering that identity. I have to be in the right relationship with the identity of needing to be seen as smart, that I can let it be on the back burner rather than I have to promote it anxiously in the moment. So that's what I mean about being in the right relationship with it. And when you are in the right relationship with it, It's not promoting itself, it's just contributing through the ethers in the same way as someone's beauty is just contributing, unless they're trying to make it the thing that they're promoting, or someone's wit is just part of their essence. So
Yeah.
that's how I see identity, that no, I don't think any of us are free from it until you're free from an ego, but that you want to be in the right relationship with it so you can use them creatively. Because in reality, I want the freedom to be smart and stupid and loyal and disloyal and disruptive and totally clear-headed and all of it. I want access to all the colors. And in Western culture, we get the idea, no, you need to paint in these 3 or 4 colors and everything else is pretty abhorrent. You should be ashamed of everything else. I want the whole human curriculum at my disposal here.
Yeah, that brings up something that Nate and I were watching in a podcast last night with someone named Joe Hudson. I don't know if you've heard of his work, but
Oh,
I think he's an executive coach, and I don't even know his full title, but he has two podcasts with Chris Williamson, who hosts like so many people, and I've watched both of them, and he has a lot of great wisdom, and I've just been very blown away by like the way he describes things. And he was talking about defensiveness. And
mhm.
what you just said sparked that, which is basically that if we don't want to look stupid or if we don't want to look a certain way, then when someone mentions anything that threatens that, we will become so defensive. But if we just accept, yeah, sometimes I'm stupid, sometimes I'm smart, sometimes I'm truthful, sometimes I lie, sometimes I'm kind, sometimes I'm mean. If we accept that every part of us is there, then defensiveness falls away because then you're like, yeah, sometimes I am. You don't have to defend anything. Whereas if you're ashamed of a part of yourself, you're always going to defend that because it feels like you can't tolerate someone else noticing that. And that just made so much sense to me because I can definitely be defensive sometimes when I feel like my buttons are being pushed in my insecurities of, oh, you're not looking smart or you're not looking credible. But in fact, yeah, maybe in certain ways I'm not as credible as I could be, but I'm not the most uncredited person either. So just knowing
Yeah.
that both and always exists.
Oh, Sarah, that's so well said that, yeah, as soon as we're defensive, first of all, we can't learn anything. There's no education if we're not willing to be vulnerable and curious. But that, yeah, that the game there, I say this to clients all the time, yeah, can you include this part? Because we want to amputate, we want to get rid of, we want to compartmentalize. And the idea of having to include our shame or our disgust or our history, our trauma, whatever it is that we're always looking to amputate these pieces. Now, how can I include it as my curriculum? Because anything we can include, we can then alchemize into a contribution in the same way that I talk about these, like the need to be seen as smart. Like, I hope that's alchemized enough that it's a contribution rather than something, some bizarre behavior that takes me over and I have to be something. So yeah, that being aware of that defensiveness or even defensiveness as a practice. Can I notice wherever I'm defensive? And that's a portal into something, some characteristic I can change my relationship with. It's just a
Hmm.
cool experiment.
Yeah. So how do we like if we start noticing and then we start being in relationship with pieces of our identity instead of going into fix it mode,
Mhm.
do we just practice baby steps towards being kinder to this part of us and then trying to create a new, more helpful pattern? Or how does identity change begin to take place?
Well, I think first of all, we want to be aware of what's in the house. What are we working with? And this is what comes up in the freedom course is can you actually make the list of how you need to be seen, what you need people to think about you when you walk in the room? What are the 5 adjectives that you want them to attach to you? And what are the adjectives? What are they not allowed to think about you? What are they not allowed to say? Or you're not allowed to think I'm not fashionable or not popular or whatever the criteria is that we happen to have, just so we can notice what are we managing? And it's going to
Mm,
change depending on who you're in front of, like your peers or an authority figure. So just appreciating those. And then you want to watch them come up in real time. So usually with a client, I'll track one at a time. I have a client right now who's tracking his need to be seen as generous,
mm,
which means that anyone who asks him for anything, he's got to say yes. I don't care if it's someone who's unhoused who's asking for money or a friend who's asking him to contribute to something or can you do this favor for me? He has to say yes. He has to give of himself because he has this idea that is always generous. And then he ends up presenting the people that he's generous with. We want critical thinking around our generosity, who you feel called to give to and who you don't feel called to contribute to. That's a valuable bit of information for you. So he's just noticing right now, wow, man, I can't stop giving. Look, there's no intelligence to this at all. I'm giving to everybody. Oh, and there's the resentment to follow. So he's just tracking this phenomenon where he gives when he doesn't want to, and then he feels resentful about it, and then he worries he doesn't have enough. Rinse, repeat. So that's
Mm,
the phase he's in right now of can I just observe this pattern of behavior? And he didn't wake up deciding today I'm going to say yes to everything everyone asks of me, and then I'm going to resent them for it. It's not what he put on his to-do list, but appreciating this pattern of behavior in him that has him,
mm,
absolutely has him. And this is a pattern of behavior that's tanking his career, it's tanking his marriage, it's taken root in a number of different areas. So the next phase of that is him starting to share about this with other people, being able to call it out in real time, the need to be seen as generous, not with everyone, but with people that he's safe enough to say, yeah, I can feel this coming up, or I'm afraid to be seen as withholding. Afraid to be seen as selfish, and getting to work that out. And that's something we're going to be doing in some coaching and a little bit of therapeutic work. And it's something it will also be able to address in his personal relationships where he's going to have to hear from people, oh, we don't think you're selfish at all. How insane. Because most of the time, what we're doing with our identity is solving a problem we don't have. That's what the
mm,
survival system does. It puts our attention on this problem and dedicates us to solving this problem we never had in the first place.
yep.
It turns out, and I don't mean this to toot my own horn, I say this to illustrate the concept. Apparently, I don't have a problem with not looking smart. Apparently, I'm busy solving a problem I don't have. And most people who have a loyalty thing or a generosity thing or whatever it is you're promoting, not actually your problem,
Yeah.
not actually your problem. So there are processes and steps to changing your relationship with that, being able to call it out in real time, and ultimately being able to risk making a different decision.
Yeah. Problem that is not there is a lot of times what my clients come with in a very healthy, loving relationship. But
Mhm.
what if this doesn't work? And, what if this and that because of their past experiences in relationships or their just general worries about safety and survival in relationships, but they're in a very safe, loving, stable relationship. And it's almost like we're creating those problems. So that makes a lot of
Right.
sense to me.
So it's not their relationship with their partner that's challenged. It's their relationship with uncertainty that needs to get developed.
Yep.
Totally makes
1000%.
sense.
Yep. A
Where
thousand
we think
percent.
the problem is rarely where it is. Yeah, it's just good to be aware of.
Yeah, and that actually leads to a personal question. I feel a little vulnerable asking about this, but you just kind of teed it off perfectly. And I'm going through my own kind of, I feel like there's an identity change on the horizon for me. I've been
Mhm.
identifying with the label relationship anxiety coach for the last 5 years, and I feel like that filter has really influenced everything I do. But you just said it so beautifully that the work that ends up happening with the clients that I work with a lot of the times is about relationship to uncertainty, about trusting themselves, about feeling more confident, about asking for their needs, about understanding some of their fears and how to be more compassionate to them. It's not really about relationship anxiety, but that just felt like this. I don't know, the title felt for a long time helpful. And
Okay.
now I'm realizing there's kind of an evolution on the horizon and it's no longer feeling as helpful. It feels like I'm
Mhm.
boxed in a little bit, but
Mhm. Mhm.
you kind of just talked me through it with a hypothetical example where it's like, okay, I start to notice, where this identity is coming up and I start to notice where it's showing up and feeling unhelpful and how to make little changes towards it. But I guess, do you have any guidance or insight as to maybe the label that we put on ourselves, like this type of coach or
Yes.
this type of content?
Yes. Okay. So if you don't mind me, playing with you here a little bit,
Yes.
what does your fear and shame say will happen if you surrender that title?
My fear and shame says that people are not going to be interested in the next thing that I share about, or that it
Hmm.
won't be as easy to come into my world because for so long I was very clear, very specific, very niche. And so people knew right away, this is either for me or it's not for me. And so if I
Hmm.
step out of this box and I'm kind of like, I'm doing many things, or I don't have a clear set niche or a clear set title, then no one's going to be able to come into my world to get support. So, yeah.
So you probably know this from your work, but you just said the word that gave away, that let us know we are not in the territory of intuition. That was total superstition that just came up. Because what we
Mm-hmm.
heard was, yeah, if I'm not offering them a clear door to step through, a clear box to check, no one's coming. It's
Yep.
not like, well, I'm going to lose a few clients or I might struggle financially or maybe I'll be less relevant. It was suddenly, no one's coming. I'm going to die alone. There is no God. Things get
Black or
really
white.
extreme really fast. Right,
All
right.
or
Now, I'm not
nothing.
saying you believe that black and whiteness, but fear and shame speak with an entirely unearned authority,
Yeah.
which is why we can't logic our way out of them. If I was to take that bait and we got into battle about it, you would win that argument of like, hey, without a niche, I'm going to lose something, because usually fear and shame are stronger than logic, even
Yep.
really valid logic. But what's really effective with fear and shame is curiosity. It's really effective at just eroding some of the credibility of the fear and shame that say, oh, yeah, no one's going to come to this. This is how it goes. And we just need the little curiosity that's like, yeah, are you sure? Is it possible? I don't know. Is it possible? This is one thing that superstition never has any nuance to it. It's never, well, I might experience that for a few weeks and then it might evolve into something else, or I might actually have an even clearer title. Or frankly, the people you're working with are probably evolving too. You're less interested in working with people who are going to pick and compartmentalize with those particular boxes. You're wanting a more nuanced audience anyway, and there's risk in that. So this is allowing
Mm-hmm.
yourself the evolution and the risk that comes with that. It's a courageous act to throw your hat over the fucking wall, especially when it requires a new identity and a surrender of an old one, especially an old one that's yielded so much. It's been
Yeah.
so fruitful. It's had so much traction. And it's actually more heroic to let it go while it's still working rather than, oh man, this thing is entirely bankrupt already. Now I have to let it go. Now's the time to make that pivot, if I may be so bold here.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's been brewing. And I mean, transparently, by the time this episode comes out, I'll have already had my wedding, which is crazy to say.
Oh my
But
gosh.
right now, I'm just having to compartmentalize because I'm like, okay, this is brewing. But realistically, I have another part-time job right now doing wedding stuff. So I can't give myself as much space to lean into the shift. But I know the shift is coming. And I think I'm having classic, just resistance. Okay, what's this change going to look like? And the uncertainty feels intimidating. And I imagine that's what you see with a lot of your clients when you're doing identity work, that some of those same patterns come up where you just feel a little uncomfortable about it.
That's right. Like, why wouldn't a change like this generate a whole lot of noise about what you stand to lose in the process, especially when it's yielded so much?
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is why it's courageous to actually surrender something that has yielded so much in the spirit of your own personal evolution and your calling, which is moving in a different direction, it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. I
I'll be
think
so curious
receiving
to hear where you
that,
go.
yeah, receiving that is really helpful because I can so easily spot and help guide my clients when I see resistance or when I see those fear voices coming up. But I have my own coaching work that I'm doing outside of this that I've been trying to lean into accepting that I still have growth for my own journey in that because we're human and it's not always gonna just be quick and easy to do something as big as shifting an identity, especially one we've, like you said, held on to and it's been quote successful and it's led to a lot
Yeah,
of positive things.
that's right. That's right. So it's anytime we're evolving, our evolution is a threat to who we think we are at any given moment. So you're allowed to feel both excited and terrified about it because it does threaten the status quo. It does. It's
Yeah.
supposed to. It's supposed to feel like unstable ground. And I think that's often reassuring to be like, oh yeah, it's supposed to feel like an earthquake at this moment. That's not an inappropriate reaction to this. This is quite destabilizing and disruptive. That's fertile ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me think as well too about the identity of being anxious even. Like I'm an
Oh
anxious
my gosh.
person or I'm so anxious in relationships. It makes it really hard then when you start feeling more joy or ease or calm. That is a threat to your identity. So I see that a lot as well in the work I do. So I'm curious just like if you notice that coming up with the work you do as well.
Completely. I mean, most of the work I'm doing with clients is what is the noise in your head and is it true and what's your relationship to it and can you can you have it rather than it has you? But this tends to draw in a lot of highly anxious clients who, when they start to feel better, often come in about the 3 or 4 month mark going, yeah, I'm worried. This feels irresponsible. I feel like I don't know who I am. Like I'm not in this kind of compulsive checking, reassuring, rearranging the furniture mentally. Am I okay? Is this okay? Am I dropping a ball somewhere? Because when we're not running that nervous energy and that constant self-criticism through our internal landscape all the time, we feel unrecognizable to ourselves, even though that's what we wanted. So yeah, I
Yeah.
totally see that it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and there's understandable resistance to it. We also get to see, oh, this was a function that the anxiety performed. It like helped you feel like you were being responsible and relevant and on top of shit, even though you felt like out of control and losing your mind. So, and getting to appreciate that a little bit. Oh, right, this was a useful function for a while.
Yeah, it was helping with some sort of outcome, but the outcome wasn't necessarily always what we wanted it to be.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Well, I have a few final questions. This one is interesting. What would you say is the difference between what we identify as versus maybe like our essence or who we are below
Hmm.
those identities? Because I feel like you hear in the IFS model of like we have the protectors and the things that are trying to block us, and maybe in some ways the things we identify with can be that like protective shield. But at our
Hmm.
core, maybe we have just this energy of more, I guess, calm or genuine, or it's like we trust a little bit more of ourselves. So, do you think there's a difference between what we identify with and who we are, or is it just about the way we relate to those things?
No, I totally think there's a difference. To me, the distinction is like essence versus behavior. And when someone's behavior is out of alignment with their essence, there's something suspicious going on usually. But yeah, that we can identify with the external, with the labels, with the qualities. And the fact is, like, just because I might have the label one day of, oh yeah, I'm making a disloyal choice here. It was time to leave this relationship. This didn't feel good anymore. I don't need the freedom to be disloyal at that moment. I'm clear that loyalty is part of my essence, and so I can include that behavior as an honoring of the essence out of self-care, rather than like I'm not looking to hurt anybody or harm myself or take advantage, that it was simply time. So appreciating that there's a time for all of it and that essence and behavior are distinct. Well, it's important to recognize that. But yeah, I think ultimately in our growth, in our healing process, we end up identifying more with the essence than the behavior or external labels or identity. To me, that's more of freedom, because from that essence, I can take any action, I can be anything, I can be seen as anything. That's
Mm.
mobility and freedom to me. Not I have to be seen this way all the time and I have to maintain these pieces and keep promoting these pieces. It's exhausting.
Yeah, more flexibility is what I'm hearing. Okay, cool. Well,
Yeah.
before I ask my final questions that I ask all my guests, is there anything else about identity or just anything you think we left out of this conversation that you want to bring in?
I just want to reiterate this idea that they can all be useful. It feels really counterintuitive to appreciate all of these qualities and characteristics in the human curriculum that are at our disposal. It's easy to get judgmental. I want these, I don't want these ones, and that they are all useful. Freedom is being able to contribute and create with all parts of ourselves, including the wounds. So I just want to double down on that.
Yeah, that's really helpful reminder. Well, one question I ask all my guests because it's the You Love and You Learn podcast. What is one thing you've learned about love that you would want to leave listeners with?
Oh, that it's a verb. It's a verb. It's in action. It's alive. This is not a conceptual model of affection, that it's in action.
Yeah, I love that sentiment as well. I found it to be so true when I'm waiting for just a feeling of love to come down and hit me like a lightning bolt. That
Mhm.
never feels so helpful. But when I'm doing loving actions or initiating love and receiving it back through action, that always feels a little bit more real and tangible.
Yeah, yeah. And then often we're looking, yeah, as you said, we're often looking to our feelings to affirm it rather than, no, we can look at the actions, we can look at the circumstances. A lot of evidence there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I would love for you to share more about the upcoming, I guess actually by the time this is recorded, it'll be out in the world. So share more about the workbook that you have for people and where they can find more about you and your work.
Sure. The Freedom Coursebook is the bulk of my curriculum. I can't remember offhand, it's 10 or 11 modules. I think it's 10 modules. And you can go to molliebirney.com. That's my website. You can also find me on Instagram at Mollie Birney. And I work with people individually. I do individual coaching. I also do groups and couples. But if you're looking to do self-study, the Freedom Course book is where it's at. It's pretty intense, and I welcome you to it.
Yeah. And I feel like all the stuff we just heard you talk about today, it seems like it will be a way for people to really walk through that path on their own and understand for themselves a little bit more about why or who they are and just things that they can do to take those steps towards an identity that they resonate with.
Yeah, yeah, the identity is just one of the modules, but we're taking a look at what's the noise, what's the commentary that's in your head, what does the inner critic have to say most commonly, the difference between behavioral change and transformation, understanding the difference between your superstitions and your intuition, which we touched on briefly
Mm,
today. So there's a lot of content, but it's really around changing your relationship to the internal landscape. That's the
mm.
game.
Super powerful. Well, thank you so much, Molly. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll make sure to put all her links in the show notes and we'll see you for the next episode.